The family reunion should have been a lighthearted day, the kind of celebration that makes you take a deep breath and think, finally, a moment to see everyone again, catch up, laugh at the same stories, and feel like we're still part of something together. You arrived with that expectation in your heart, maybe even with a discreet smile, imagining who would be the first to hug you. But as soon as you stepped into the hall, you realized the atmosphere wasn't what you remembered. The conversation seemed normal at first glance. Laughter echoed. Children ran from one side to the other. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The first sign was subtle. When you walked in, no one looked in your direction. It wasn't that classic moment when someone arrives and several faces turn to see who's come. On the contrary, it was as if your presence had been intentionally ignored. You took a few steps, hoping that at least someone would notice your arrival. But nothing. It was as if you were invisible. A strange feeling ran down your spine, a small pang of warning, but you took a deep breath and thought, okay, maybe they're distracted. Then came the second sign. You walked over to the table where two cousins were chatting animatedly. They were laughing loudly, talking about some old family video. When you approached, hoping to join the conversation, they both stopped at the same time. The laughter ceased instantly. They looked away, as if searching for something on the floor or the ceiling. One of them even pretended to receive a message on his cell phone, and without saying a word, they both walked away, each to their own side, abandoning the conversation in midair, like smoke dissolving in the wind. It hit you like a weight on your chest. Rejection, even when silent, always comes as a punch. You tried to keep your composure, not wanting to show that you were shaken. You straightened your spine, adjusted your clothes, and thought that maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they really were going to do something else. I'm not going to jump to conclusions, you told yourself. But deep down, something was beginning to twist inside you. An unsettling, almost painful feeling. You decided to try again, with someone else. You saw your favorite aunt near the dessert table. She was the one who lived with you for a while. She always said she considered you like a son. This should have been easy. When you approached, she saw you coming, and hesitated. Her expression changed. She forced a smile, but not the kind, warm smile you remembered. It was a tense, short, almost mechanical smile. And before you could say anything, she put her hand on someone else's shoulder and said, "Let's go over there quickly. I'll be right back." You reached out to respond, but she was already walking away, almost hurried, without looking back. By this point, there was no denying it. Something was happening. People weren't just distracted. They were avoiding you. The entire room seemed to move in a synchronized, sinuous way, creating a kind of emotional whirlwind where you always remained on the outside. Every time you tried to approach, someone moved away. Every time you tried to start a conversation, someone changed the subject, or stood up, or pretended not to hear. Even the children, usually spontaneous, were pulled away by their parents when you approached them. The atmosphere, which should have been welcoming, seemed to shrink around you. The walls seemed closer, the sounds of conversations distorted, distant, as if you were underwater. Your heart began to beat faster. Your throat went dry. You tried to maintain a neutral expression, but inside, 1,000 thoughts clashed. Did I do something wrong? Did I say something I shouldn't have? Did someone make something up about me? Why doesn't anyone answer my hi? Why doesn't anyone look at me? Why this atmosphere? The feeling of loneliness there, in the midst of your own family, was devastating. You looked at familiar faces, and for the first time, they seemed strange. There was something deeper there. It wasn't just indifference. It was discomfort. It was judgment. It was fear. It was as if everyone knew something you didn't. As if everyone shared a secret that had you as the protagonist. And not in a good way. You sat in a chair at the back, trying to observe, trying to piece things together. You noticed sidelong glances, people whispering as they looked at you and then quickly looked away, as if they'd been caught doing something forbidden. Nothing was said clearly, but everything was communicated between the lines, and those subtexts screamed. It was then, in that moment of silence and inner turmoil, that the question began to echo, insistent, unsettling, impossible to ignore. The question that would become the guiding thread of this story, the flame that would begin to illuminate the truth behind that inexplicable behavior. Why was my own family treating me like a stranger? When you received the invitation to the family reunion, your heart reacted almost automatically, with a familiar warmth, a pleasant feeling of nostalgia, the kind that makes you smile to yourself. It had been a long time since you'd seen everyone gathered in the same place. The hustle and bustle of daily life, the commitments, the small distances that time creates, all of that made that meeting seem special. You went to the event genuinely believing it would be a warm reunion, one of those rare days that remind us of where we came from and who we are. And it wasn't just empty expectation. You had reasons to believe you would be received with affection. After all, for years, you had always been there. At birthday parties, Sunday barbecues, end-of-year celebrations, there you were. Whenever someone needed help, whether financial, emotional, or practical, you were one of the first to show up. How many times did you leave home late at night to pick up a relative who was without a car? How many times did you lend money without asking for anything in return? How many times did you open your door to welcome someone who was going through difficulties? His relationship with his family has always been built on 3 pillars: closeness, support, and trust. The closeness came from frequent interaction. You grew up alongside many of them there. You shared toys, tears, fights, and reconciliations. You spent hours chatting on the porch, listening to stories from the elders, learning lessons about work, faith, and survival. It was a relationship made of real memories, both good and difficult. The support was almost instinctive. When someone fell, you extended your hand. When someone made a mistake, you offered understanding. When someone needed help, you found a way. You never did it out of obligation. You did it because you believed that's what family was: a network that supports, lifts up, and welcomes. And trust. That was perhaps the most painful part to remember, because you truly believed that those people knew you, that they knew who you really were, that they would never believe anything bad about you without hearing your side of the story. You were certain that, whatever happened, your family would be your safe space, the place where you didn't have to pretend anything, your emotional home. Therefore, that morning, as you got ready for the reunion, you felt genuine joy. You carefully chose your outfit, thinking about looking presentable. Perhaps you even brought a dessert, a gift, something symbolic to share. You got into the car with the peaceful thought of someone who believes they will be welcomed. Maybe you even imagined the hugs, the reunions, someone saying, "It's been so long, we missed you." But upon arriving at the place and realizing that the reception would be the complete opposite, it was difficult not to feel the pain of this contrast. Because when we expect little from someone, the disappointment is bearable. But when we expect affection from those we love and receive coldness, the impact is devastating. And that's where a deep emotional connection is created with those who witness your story. Because almost everyone has experienced something similar, not exactly the same, but emotionally similar. Everyone has felt the pain of giving their best to someone and receiving indifference, of donating time, energy, sacrifice, and when they most need a friendly shoulder, finding silence. How many people have offered everything to their family and yet were treated as if they were a burden? How many have had their intentions distorted, their kindness ignored, or their efforts erased? It's a universal wound, the wound of being misunderstood by those who should understand you best, the wound of being judged by those who should defend you, the wound of realizing that family doesn't always mean protection. Sometimes, it means vulnerability. The audience watching your video feels this immediately. This topic builds essential identification. The idea that you are not just one person going through an isolated situation. You are a mirror of many hidden stories, many suppressed feelings, many injustices experienced in silence. That's why you recall specific moments from your relationship with your family. The times you gave up something to help a nephew, the nights you stayed up giving advice, the opportunities you let pass to help someone. You remember this not to boast, but because that's how you understood family love, as a sincere exchange, not as an accounting of who gave more or less, but as a continuous construction. And it is precisely because you have such a solid, genuine history that the cold reception that day crushed you in such an unexpected way. What you found didn't match everything you had experienced over the years. It was as if, suddenly, all the memories had been rewritten, distorted, erased, or replaced by something you didn't yet understand. You tried to convince yourself that there had been some misunderstanding. Something simple, a communication problem, a temporary situation. But each cold gesture, each averted gaze, each silent withdrawal reinforced the same feeling. Something had changed radically, and you had no idea why. It is this emotional dissonance that creates the narrative weight of this topic. You believed you were going to a celebration of affection, but what you found was a field of emotional ice. And, as anyone would, you began to search for answers. You began to wonder, what happened while I was away? Who told anyone something about me? Why does my name seem burdened with something I don't understand? And how, after everything I've done for this family, have I come to be treated like someone who no longer belongs? The long-standing relationship, built on years of closeness and trust, seemed to have broken overnight. And at that moment, you realize that sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the one who held the keys to your heart. After a few minutes trying to understand the awkward atmosphere of the meeting, you decided to do what anyone would do. Approach someone you knew to try and break the uncomfortable ice. You didn't want to fuel paranoia or jump to conclusions. After all, they were people from your own family, people you'd watched grow up, people you'd supported, people you'd hugged on difficult days, people you'd known your whole life. So with that thought, you took a deep breath and mustered the courage to take the first step. You saw your cousin sitting near the drinks table. He was fiddling with his phone, laughing at something someone had sent. He was a cousin you'd always had a good relationship with. You'd grown up together, played in your grandmother's backyard, shared childhood secrets. The memory of that gave you a little confidence. If there was anyone you could start a normal conversation with, it was him. Then you approached with a slight smile, that kind of smile that tries to disguise the tension. And you said something simple, basic, natural, like, "Hey, how are you? It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Your cousin heard your voice. You clearly saw the exact moment he registered your presence. His body stiffened, his shoulders hunched, and the lightness in his expression vanished as if someone had switched off a light inside him. He looked up, and that's when you felt something strange. He didn't smile. He didn't answer. He didn't seem happy to see you. In fact, he seemed uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. He glanced to the side, as if searching for someone to rescue him from that 5-word conversation. His eyes avoided yours as if looking at you had become difficult. And then, almost rehearsed, he put his cell phone back in his pocket and said, I need to help over there. We'll talk later." But the tone was dry, hurried, fake, and he left too quickly for someone who really needed to help with something. You stood there trying to understand what had just happened, and for a second you tried to rationalize. Maybe he was really busy. Maybe he felt called by someone. Maybe he's going through a difficult time. But the truth is, his body felt it before his mind accepted it. This wasn't normal. It wasn't a coincidence. There was an explicit rejection in the way he left. Still, you tried to stay calm. After years of living with that family, you knew that sometimes things seemed strange when they weren't. So you took a deep breath and decided to try again with someone else. You didn't want to be paranoid. You didn't want to imagine things. You spotted a cousin. She was getting food from the table, chatting with someone else. You approached her kindly, greeted her, and asked how she was. She turned her head for a split second, saw it was you, and the change happened again, as if a switch had been flipped off inside her. Her expression changed, her posture changed, her energy changed. She replied with an almost inaudible, "Hi," one of those that seem obligatory, unnatural. And just like her cousin, she quickly made up an excuse. Just I'll be right back." And it disappeared. You stood there staring into space, trying to process it. 2 attempts, 2 rejections. A coincidence was still possible. 2 already seemed like a pattern beginning to emerge. And then you tried a 3rd time, and a 4th, maybe with your aunt, maybe with your brother-in-law, maybe with an adult nephew who'd always been close. And each time, the dynamic repeated itself with different versions of the same discomfort. A person who avoided eye contact, another one that would get restless when you came near, yet another one who invented a reason to go out, someone who simply pretended not to hear when you called. And so, little by little, like pieces of a macabre puzzle, everything fell into place. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't chance. It was collective behavior, and there was no logical explanation, not at that moment. The feeling of rejection began to grow from the inside out, occupying every part of your body. You felt your chest tighten, your stomach churn, your throat go dry. When you tried to smile, it felt like your face was heavy. When you tried to get close to someone, it felt like you were walking through an emotional minefield. It was as if everyone knew something you didn't, as if your presence was unwelcome, as if your name had been associated with something bad, something shameful, something you had no idea about. Each person who walked away reinforced the same silent message. You shouldn't be here. You are not welcome. There's something wrong with you. And worst of all, Nobody said what it was. The human mind doesn't cope well with silence. When it receives no answers, it fills the void with fear. You began revisiting old memories in seconds, searching for some forgotten conflict, some argument, some misunderstanding that could justify it. But you found nothing. The feeling intensified with each passing minute. It was like being in the center of an invisible storm, where everyone felt the effects, except you. A heavy, dense, suffocating atmosphere. No matter how hard you tried to convince yourself it was an exaggeration, your body said otherwise. Something was very wrong, something beyond your imagination, because collective rejection doesn't happen without reason, even when the reason is based on lies, gossip, or manipulation. And there, at that family gathering, in that environment that was once synonymous with belonging, you realized that something deep had broken, something serious. And the first sign was exactly that. The conversation was interrupted. The averted gaze, the quick exit. The silence spoke louder than any words. And when so many people repeat the same behavior, it's no coincidence. That's the intention. You just didn't know it yet. Who I was, behind it, and why. But I would soon find out. Very soon. At this point in the meeting, when you had already tried to start some conversations and received only silence, avoidance, or poorly worded excuses, the atmosphere around you began to take on an almost palpable weight. It was no longer just an isolated discomfort. It was a climate that seemed to envelop the entire environment. Something hung in the air, dense, tense, as if everyone there was walking on eggshells around you, avoiding any movement that might draw your attention. It was as if your presence had become a collective annoyance, and it hurt in a way you couldn't explain. There was a strange pattern in the way people behaved. When you walked up to a group, the group would disperse. When you tried to approach a circle of conversation, the circle would subtly open up, but clearly enough to leave you outside. When you greeted someone, you received short, quick, often emotionless responses. It was as if they were afraid of being seen talking to you. And then came a detail that cut even deeper. The children. Children don't know how to hide their feelings. They don't know how to pretend. They don't know how to disguise fear or embarrassment. They reflect exactly what they feel and often what they hear adults say. And when you tried to approach one of them, perhaps to play, ask how school was going, comment on how much they had grown, the reaction was immediate. The little girl who had been smiling, playing, and running around stopped. She looked at you with a strange expression, half confused, half frightened. And before you could say a word, her mother pulled the child by the arm, as if protecting her from something dangerous. The gesture was quick, impulsive, almost instinctive. Come here, daughter. Let's go to the other side. Without looking at you, without smiling, without pretending. And it didn't just happen once. It happened at least 3 times, each time with different parents. Children. Being pushed away, pulled away, removed from your vicinity, as if you were a threat. That crushed something inside you, because when an adult avoids you, you might think of disagreement, gossip, misunderstanding, but when even the children start being pushed away, it means something much worse is going on, and you don't know what it is. Your body began to react before you could control it. Your heart raced, pounding in your chest as if trying to burst out. Your breathing became short and irregular. Your hands grew cold, almost icy, even though the environment wasn't cold. A tight knot formed in your stomach, the kind that instantly makes you lose your appetite. Each step felt heavy, as if you were trying to walk through a thick liquid. Your vision even blurred a little when you tried to focus on anything. You began to feel the emotional pressure of that environment as if you were in a place where you shouldn't be. Not because you did anything wrong, but because someone, at some point, had done something that completely changed how they saw you. You didn't know what it was, but the certainty that there was a reason behind that escalating behavior was unavoidable. The silence between people as you walked by was deafening. Not the natural silence of distraction or concentration. It was a tense, heavy, uncomfortable silence. A judgmental silence. A silence of those who prefer not to get involved. A silence that isolated you more with each passing minute. The feeling of being watched also began to grow. Not in a clear way. No one was staring directly at you, but it was as if glances were being cast from behind. Quick, discreet, almost clandestine. You would turn around and no longer see anything, but you could feel it. The body feels before the mind understands, and your body was screaming that something was profoundly wrong. And while you were trying to stay strong, trying not to fall apart right there, a thought began to surface, persistent, disturbing, unsettling. It was as if I had become the villain of the family, but without knowing why. That phrase kept hammering in her head, because that's exactly how everything seemed. It was as if a story had been told about her, a story she wasn't a part of, as if someone had constructed a version of her that had nothing to do with who she really was. And that version had been spread, consolidated, repeated, and fed. And now, there in the meeting, you were facing the consequences of that invisible narrative. By this point, observing the meeting was like watching a strange play, where you were the character no one wanted to be in. Groups that were once warm now murmured. Faces that were once familiar now seemed hard, suspicious, cold. You noticed that when someone laughed, the laughter died when they saw you. When someone was chatting animatedly, the conversation thinned out. When someone was telling a story, the words seemed to get lost when you approached. And the worst part wasn't the behavior itself. It was that nobody explained anything. Nobody had the courage to speak openly about what was happening. Everyone preferred the weight of silence to honesty. Everyone preferred to keep their distance, rather than face you. This type of rejection, when it comes en masse, causes a physical, almost animalistic sensation of danger. The body goes on alert. The brain starts trying to find invisible threats. The heart races trying to prepare you for something you don't yet understand. It was pure instinct. The instinct of someone who realizes they are being treated as an enemy. And all of this created an emotional scenario that few could endure without breaking inside. Because there is no pain more confusing than being rejected by those who once called you family. The energy in the air weighed on you like a shadow that, at that moment, seemed larger than any explanation you could imagine. And without realizing it, you began to prepare yourself internally. Your body knew. Something was coming. Something that would completely change the way you saw that family. Something that would explain all that coldness, all that distance, all that silent rejection. You just didn't know the answer would come in such a cruel way, projected in front of everyone, on a large screen, under bright lights, as if it were a spectacle, a show where you would be the star, but not in the way I imagined. After wandering around the room for a while, trying to fit into conversations that wouldn't open up and spaces that seemed to shrink when you arrived, something happens that changes the focus of the meeting. One of the organizers, perhaps a cousin, an uncle, or one of the children of an older person, claps her hands and draws everyone's attention. Guys, let's sit down. We've prepared a slideshow with family photos. You're going to love it. People begin to move in the same direction, as if they had received a unified command. Chairs are pulled out, sofas are occupied, some even sit on the floor, all around a large television or a projector pointed at the wall. Lively laughter erupts here and there. Someone says, "Wow, this is going to be funny." Another comments, "Hopefully they didn't put up that picture of me by the pool." You observe all this with a glimmer of hope igniting within you, a slideshow of family photos. This, in any context, is something that unites, that brings people closer, that makes everyone remember the shared past. A moment of nostalgia, of memories, of belonging. Part of you thinks, maybe now the atmosphere will change. Maybe, with the photos, everyone will relax, laugh together, and things will go back to normal. So you start walking towards the group, with that timid but still vivid expectation. With each step, you try to convince yourself that you're exaggerating, that perhaps you misinterpreted the glances and the distances. It's just tiredness. It's just my imagination. They still consider me part of this. You cling to this idea like someone clinging to a wooden plank in the middle of the sea. But as he approaches the seats, something happens that cuts that hope off at the root. You walk behind two family members who are about to sit down side by side. One of them glances quickly at you, as if checking where you're going, and you hear, almost in a whisper, but clear enough to leave no doubt, "It's best not to get close." The sentence is short, but it's loaded with venom. The other family member replies, with something you don't fully understand, but you hear a word that hurts: situation. You're not sure if they said, "because of the situation," or "until this is resolved." But it hardly matters, because what's clear is that you've become someone people want to keep their distance from. You try to pretend you didn't hear. Your face remains as neutral as possible, but inside the ground opens up a little more. That phrase echoes in your head like a warning in red letters. It's best not to get close. Close to you. About you. Someone from your own family saying this. About you. And as if the universe had decided to force you to see reality, you realize it wasn't an isolated comment. When you look around, you notice small gestures, chairs being moved slightly to the side, people adjusting their body positions to avoid leaving space next to you, someone placing a bag on a chair that could be free for you to sit on. All very subtle, but very clear to those on the outside. You're looking for somewhere you can fit in, a space where your presence doesn't create visible discomfort. But it seems like all the natural seats have already been taken by a kind of invisible logic that automatically excludes you. There's no invitation, no look that says, "Sit here with us." Nothing. What exists is only that cold feeling that, wherever you sit, it will be too much. So you make a decision that, although simple, carries enormous weight. You choose not to compete for space, not to insist, not to force your presence. Instead of trying to occupy a chair among them, you take a spare chair, a little further away, almost at the back of the room. You place the chair there silently and sit alone, in a spot where you can see the screen, but at the same time remain practically outside the main circle. While everyone else groups themselves into blocks of proximity and intimacy, you form a block of one. From there, the perspective is different. You see the family as a whole, a unit, of which you are no longer a part. You see smiles, side conversations, excitement. Someone comments, "This part is unmissable." Another says, "You're going to laugh your head off." And you, sitting in the back, feel a bitter mix of sensations. Part of you still wants to believe that you will be included in this slideshow as someone dear, important, part of the story. Another part already knows deep down that you won't. The atmosphere, already heavy, seems to become even denser, as if the air were laden with something you can't see but can feel deeply. Your breathing slows, as if you have to make an effort to draw in air. Your chest tightens, and the feeling of being out of place transforms into something greater, a kind of premonition of humiliation. You observe people's backs, all turned towards you, all oriented in the direction of the screen, and this creates a painful symbolic image, the whole family looking one way, and you alone behind them. It's almost poetic and cruel. The slideshow presenter turns off the lights. The room darkens, leaving only the light from the projected screen. This physical change in the environment also changes the internal atmosphere. When the lights go out, it seems as if the masks fall. In the dark, people feel freer to react, laugh, comment, and you, in the shadows in the background, feel that you are about to see something that will finally explain that strange behavior. Silence falls for a second, that tense pause before any important presentation. You hear someone comment, "Further ahead, now it's going to begin," and you think, without saying it aloud, "Now I'll understand." But for now, all you understand is that something had already been clearly decided, and you weren't consulted. The way they sidelined you, how they avoided you, how they isolated you, all of that was part of an emotional preparation for what was to come. The atmosphere becomes even heavier, almost suffocating, when the first image appears. But before it appears, there's a detail you notice that sends shivers down your spine. Nobody looks back. Nobody checks if you're there. Nobody invites you to come closer. Nobody says, "Hey, come and see from up front with us." For them, what matters is what will be shown on the screen. For you, what matters is what they've already decided to believe, even before you have the right to your side of the story. The meeting, which should have been a heartwarming reunion, has now turned into a silent trial, and you, sitting alone in the back, feel like you're about to be judged, not with direct words, not with questions, but with something far more dangerous: images. Images have power, and that night, you would discover just how far someone was willing to go to use that power against you. The room is dimly lit. Only the light from the screen illuminates the faces inside. You, sitting at the back, can see the blue and white reflection on people's backs, in their hair, on their shoulders. The sound from the projector or TV fills some of the silence, that low hum that always accompanies this type of presentation. And suddenly, the first slide appears. It's an old birthday photo. One of those birthdays where the whole family squeezed into Grandma's living room, the table full of different dishes, a simple cake, but full of candles. You recognize every detail. You recognize the flowered tablecloth, which was already a little worn at the time. You recognize the different chairs, because there were never identical chairs for everyone. You even recognize the fan sitting in a corner, which almost never worked properly. Someone in the front lets out a nostalgic sigh. "Look at this. What a great time." People start laughing, pointing, and commenting. "Look at my face. Look at Mom's hair." That was the day the power went out, remember? You can't help it. A small smile appears at the corner of your lips. That photo isn't just any image. It's a piece of history. A piece of you, too. There you are, younger, standing near the cake or sitting near the table, laughing, holding a plate. And for a few seconds, you feel something you haven't felt since you arrived. Belonging. Another photo. Now, a family trip. Maybe a beach, maybe a country house. People in simple clothes, sandals, shorts, hair blowing in the wind. The strong sun blazing down on the lens of an old camera. Children with feet full of sand. Adults with cans of soda or coffee in plastic cups. Someone shouts, "Oh my God, that was the trip where we almost missed the bus back." Laughter. Lots of laughter. And you remember? You remember late afternoons, the smell of sunscreen, echoing laughter, conversations on the porch, sleepless nights on a mattress, music on the old radio. It wasn't just a stroll. It was a time when everyone seemed close, united, connected by something beyond blood, shared stories. Another photo. Natal. A simple tree, but full of decorations, many of them handmade. Crumpled wrapping paper on the ground, people hugging, someone making a face to ruin the photo, another covering their face in embarrassment. You see uncles, grandparents, nephews, cousins. You see genuine smiles. You see that moment when nobody was thinking about problems, money, or grudges. They were just there, together. In this sequence of images, something interesting happens. People relax. The meeting, which was already charged with a strange tension in relation to you, seems to dissolve for a few moments. Voices become lighter, laughter flows more freely, and comments are full of affection and nostalgia. "Look, there's Grandpa. I miss him so much. That was the last Easter with him. I remember that dress. I hated that dress." You feel a pang in your chest, but this time it's a pang of longing, a kind of good pain. That memory of a time when everything seemed simpler, when you didn't have to go to a family gathering afraid of being rejected, a time when you were just one of them, neither hero nor villain, just family. And the most curious thing is, you're in many of those photos, and in all of them, you're smiling, hugging someone, helping to serve food, holding a child in your lap, talking to someone older. Nothing there suggests that you're a problem. Nothing there matches the way they're treating you today. For a few minutes, you even wonder if you're going crazy, if everything that's happened since you arrived was a big misunderstanding, because the photos show exactly the opposite of what you're feeling now. They speak of bonds, of closeness, of affection. They show that at some point in history, you two truly were one. And for a moment, his heart tries to find solace in that. Perhaps there is still hope, you think. Perhaps the problem isn't as big as I'm feeling. But that feeling doesn't last long. The slideshow continues. More photos, more memories, birthdays of children who are now adults, simple backyard parties with crooked balloons hanging, with masking tape. That traditional happy birthday sung too loudly, someone clapping out of rhythm. Soccer games in the backyard, barbecues with too much smoke, repeated jokes. It's almost a movie of your family life playing before your eyes. Each image is proof that you were there, that you cared, that you were a part of it, that yes, you built it together with them, but then something starts to change. You notice a subtle difference in the rhythm of the images. Before, everything was more spontaneous, slightly crooked, poorly framed photos taken by a random person with little skill. Now, more recent, sharper, visibly selected photos are starting to appear. The captions, which were previously irrelevant or non-existent, are now appearing with short phrases. Phrases that, at first, seem innocent, but carry a different weight. You feel the atmosphere change first in people's bodies. The laughter diminishes. Side conversations gradually cease. Attention focuses more on the screen. The environment, which had offered an emotional respite for a few moments, becomes heavy again. So heavy that it's almost physical. A photo appears of you helping in some situation, perhaps carrying a box, holding an envelope, participating in something important. But the caption below is not neutral. It's not a simple description. It's a suggestive phrase that seems to tell a story behind your back. You frown. He feels a pang of unease, but he tries to ignore it, telling himself, it must be just a joke. But slide after slide, this feeling of strangeness intensifies. Some photos begin to evoke more delicate family moments, a division of assets, a serious conversation, a meeting in someone's office, a formal gathering, people with more serious expressions, documents on the table, tense faces. You remember those days. You remember the arguments, the difficulties, the tough decisions, but the subtitles now seem to fit you into a very specific role, as if someone had decided to retell that story from a different angle, an angle in which you are no longer part of the solution, but rather part of the problem. You notice that some people in the room are starting to fidget uncomfortably. Others cross their arms. One or two glance at you from the back of the room, then quickly look back forward, as if they didn't want to be caught staring. The climate is changing. The nostalgia that once warmed the heart gives way to something colder, harder, sharper. The photos, which at first were happy memories, are starting to seem preparatory, as if the slideshow were building a narrative, as if the old images, full of affection, were there only to establish an emotional foundation, a strong contrast, before introducing something much darker. And it's at this point that you feel, more clearly than ever, an uncomfortable sensation rising through your body. It's not just anxiety. It's not just strangeness. It's almost as if you're about to be exposed. You don't know exactly why, but feel it. My heart races again. Breathing becomes shorter. The silence now no longer seems like mere concentration. It seems like expectation. It's as if everyone is waiting for something specific, something that hasn't appeared yet, something you don't know what it is. But are you sure it involves you? And then, as the next slide begins to appear on the screen, you realize, in a fraction of a second, that this is not just another one in the sequence. Something changes. The framing, the tone of the photo, perhaps even the image quality. You don't know how to explain it, but you know that, from then on, nothing will be just nostalgia anymore. The next slide begins to appear slowly, as if the screen itself hesitates before revealing it. The visual transition is smooth, but the impact is brutal. As soon as the image is complete, the air seems to be sucked out of the room. The murmurs cease. The laughter, which still timidly echoed from previous moments, dies instantly. It's as if someone had pressed a pause button on the entire room, because this time, the photo is yours. But not just any photo. Not a good memory, not an emotional recollection, not a joyful scene spontaneously recorded. It's an image you recognize. The pose, the setting, the expression on your face, but somehow it's no longer yours. There's something profoundly wrong with that photo. Something distorted, something that has been manipulated. The framing looks strange, the light is different, the background has been changed. And what's worse, there's something in the image that wasn't there in real life. Perhaps an object that was added, an expression that was digitally altered, a caption that completely changes the meaning of the moment. In the first second, your brain tries to find a logical explanation. Could this be a hoax? Is this a joke? Why did they choose that particular photo? But even before you can organize your thoughts, the silence in the room becomes deafening. Suffocating. The kind of silence that doesn't carry neutrality. It carries judgment. You feel people's backs stiffen. You feel bodies leaning forward, wanting to see better. You feel faces turning discreetly in your direction, but avoiding direct eye contact, as if looking at you would be admitting that they've realized the gravity of the situation. His heart races. Not like before, when you were anxious. Now it's different. It's the kind of acceleration that happens when you realize you're being exposed, attacked, accused, all at the same time. That image, that edited version of you, that visual lie, it was a sentence, a carefully constructed sentence, with intention, with malice. While the slide remains frozen on the screen, you feel your throat dry up, as if something has been scratched from the inside. Your hands tremble slightly. It's an involuntary reaction, impossible to control. The feeling is of being naked, vulnerable, unprotected in the center of an arena, while a silent audience watches. The image doesn't speak for itself. It screams. She's suggesting something about you. She implies an act, an intention, an attitude that never existed. She incriminates you, not with words, but with the devastating power of the manipulated image. And the worst part, it appears to have been placed there on purpose. Nothing in that photo seems accidental. Nothing in that montage suggests a joke. Nothing there points to innocence. You notice that some people are already starting to whisper. Different whispers now. More serious, more loaded, faster. It's as if that photo were a password, a key that unlocks everything that's been trapped inside people's minds since you arrived. Things they didn't have the courage to say out loud, but that they already believed. And you realize that this is not just a slide. It is the central piece of a narrative constructed in advance, prepared for that specific moment, in front of the whole family gathered together. It's the type of attack that doesn't just try to hurt you. It tries to destroy you. You look at the image again, trying to understand how they even managed that. When was this photo taken? Who had access to it? Who edited it? Who added elements that you know weren't there before? Why would they do that? And more importantly, who would have the motivation to do something so cowardly? You feel your body temperature fluctuate, your face flushes, as if your blood has rushed too hard. At the same time, your legs feel cold, almost trembling. The physical sensation is one of chaos, of profound confusion, of disorientation. You try to move your eyes around the room to follow the reactions, but you immediately realize you shouldn't have done that. Because people, yes, all of them, are looking at you. Some feel sorry for you, others with shock, others with that kind of look that mixes disapproval and disappointment. And some look at it with something worse, something that can only be described as quiet satisfaction. The whole room seems to see you as a different person, no longer as the son, nephew, cousin, grandson, brother-in-law, brother who grew up there. Now you are a character, another one, something created by someone's mind and reinforced by a falsified image. And it is at this moment that the question arises within you, so strong that it seems to explode in your chest. It's not just doubt, it's a need for emotional survival. One question you need to answer in order to continue breathing in that environment. Who would put that there, and why? The question keeps hammering away, and hammering away, because nobody posts a photo like that by mistake. No one creates a montage like that unintentionally. No one displays something like that in front of their entire family without intending to cause harm. That was personal. This was planned. This was done to leave a mark on you, to embarrass you, to turn people against you, to turn you into the villain of the story, even if you haven't done anything wrong. And there, in that instant, in that heavy silence where the image still gleams on the screen like an accusation, you perceive a cutting truth. Someone in there wants you destroyed. And this photo is just the beginning. The forbidden image is still on the screen when the transition happens. Quick, almost aggressive. You haven't even had time to breathe, to process, to understand what was being shown. But the slideshow doesn't wait for you. It advances like a machine, determined, merciless, beginning a sequence that, from then on, would not only be uncomfortable, it would be devastating. As soon as the next slide appears, you feel a physical impact, as if you've received an invisible push. It's no longer a photo from the past, of an everyday moment, of a family event. Now it's a screenshot. Yes, a print. And once again, the protagonist of this capture is you. But the phrase attributed to you isn't yours. You know that, immediately. It's a written message you never sent, with words you would never use, in a tone you would never adopt. A malicious message, insinuating something negative, ugly, unfair, something that would never come out of your mouth, and that never did. The entire room reacts with that subtle, almost inaudible noise that occurs when many people move, breathe, or frown at the same time. A muffled hum echoes. A collective discomfort begins to settle in. Someone further ahead makes a low comment. I didn't know that. You feel your stomach churn. And before you can even try to sue, the slide appears. Another screenshot. Another alleged message from you. Another accusation based on something that never existed. The sentences just keep getting worse. The tone is becoming increasingly cruel. The prints are becoming more personal. Each slide is a stab in the back. Every image is a scam. Each sentence is an attempt to mold you into a monster you never were. And people start to react. You notice whispers. Quick, intense glances full of judgment. Expressions ranging from shock to disappointment, and from disappointment to contempt. Did he really say that? I always suspected, this is serious. You hear everything. Not because they want you to hear, but because they whisper too loudly to hide it. Too much for someone sitting alone at the back of the room, now crushed between sound and silence. Another slide. This time, it's a more elaborate setup. A collection of supposedly connected images, marked with arrows, red circles, and captions that attempt to explain something you've never done. It looks like a dossier created by someone who wanted to prove something, even if it was completely false. With each image, the narrative becomes clearer. It was a construction, a carefully crafted story. Each slide fed into the next, like chapters in a poisonous plot, stitched together with lies, exaggerations, distortions, and blatant fabrications. And you, sitting in the back, watched your own reputation being torn to shreds live, in front of everyone you once called family. The worst part is that nobody pauses the slideshow. No one raises their hand and says, "Wait a minute, that sounds strange. None of this suits him. Why are we seeing this?" No. On the contrary, people absorb that one. They accept. They consume it as if it were absolute truth. Because images are powerful in the human mind, it's easy to believe what you see, even if it's been manipulated. Another slide. Now, a photo of you in a completely different setting, with a caption suggesting malicious intent. You remember that day perfectly, and you know the context was different. But presented like that, in front of people already predisposed to judge you, it seemed incriminating. His breathing moves in an irregular rhythm. The heart pounds as if it wants to burst out of the chest. The knot in my stomach tightens, twists, rises. Your hands are trembling even when you try to hide them by interlacing your fingers. It's humiliating. Public humiliation. Deliberate. Premeditated. With each new image, you feel as if the ground is disappearing beneath your feet. It's like being in a nightmare where you scream, but no sound comes out. Where you try to defend yourself, but nobody listens. Where you try to run, but you're stuck in place. And all this while the entire room, his entire family, watches silently, absorbing that avalanche of visual accusations, believing, judging, distancing themselves more and more with each slide. You try to look to someone for understanding, support, even the slightest doubt, anything that suggests that someone there still knows you. But their faces are hard, closed. Some were shocked, others are furious, and some almost relieved to have found a reason to justify the way they've treated you since you arrived. Each slide reinforces the narrative that you are someone to be avoided, someone to be feared, someone to be excluded. It's the public transformation of the beloved relative into the family problem. And all of this happens before your eyes, without a chance to interrupt, without defense, without a voice. You feel your face getting hot, your eyes burning. It's not crying, yet. It's outrage. It's perplexing. It's the pain of absurdity. It's a feeling of injustice so profound that it becomes physical. It was impossible to stop the sharp thought that kept arising. They are destroying me. And a second later, even harder. And they believe it. The attack wasn't just visual. It was emotional, psychological, public, cruel. And deep down, you already know that someone did that on purpose. Someone gathered photos, screenshots, and distorted phrases. Someone created that false story with clear intent. But the real question, the one that hurts, the one that cuts, is yet to come. Who would do that? And why? When the 8th or 9th slide appears, you can no longer distinguish where the lie ends and the malice begins. The images, the phrases, the falsified printouts, everything accumulates like a crushing weight on your shoulders. It's an overwhelming feeling of being judged and condemned before a silent court. A court that didn't give you the right to defend yourself. A court made up of people who should know you better than any manipulated image. You feel your chest tighten. The heart beats so hard it feels like it wants to burst out of the ribcage. It's strange. At the same time that it pulses fast, it's heavy. It's a hot weight, burning behind the ribs, spreading throughout the entire body. Your mind is racing in all directions, trying to find logic, trying to connect the dots, trying to understand who could have done that. And worse, why? Because that wasn't a mistake. It wasn't someone accidentally uploading the wrong photo. It wasn't a poorly planned prank. That sequence of events had a clear intention: to destroy his image, his reputation, his presence within his own family. Your body's first impulse is to react, get up, to scream, point at the screen and say with all your might, "That's a lie. That never happened. You know me." But when you try to move, you realize your legs are shaking. It's not fear or not just fear. It's a mixture of indignation, disbelief, anger, sadness, and confusion. Your body is in a state of shock, trying to process an absurd amount of emotional information. You feel anger, a hot, throbbing anger that rises to your face, burns your ears, makes your hands tremble. But at the same time, she feels something even more painful: sadness. A profound sadness that doesn't reach the surface, but rather the depths of the soul. The sadness of seeing people you love believe, even for a few seconds, in something so cruel, so far from the truth. You try to take a deep breath, but it feels like you can't breathe. Air gets in, but it doesn't fill the space. It's as if the environment is contaminated by an energy that is too dense. And while trying to find answers, Your mind begins to list possibilities. Could it have been someone who was jealous? Could it have been someone with some old grudge? Could someone have misinterpreted something and arrived at absurd conclusions? Could it be revenge? Could this be manipulation? Could someone have tried to remove me from the scene for some ulterior motive? The truth is, you don't know. And this lack of answers eats you up inside. You observe. People very discreetly. Try to identify who is too uncomfortable, those who are too quiet, someone who seems to know more than they're letting on. But it's impossible to read them all at the same time. And it's too risky to accuse someone without being sure. You know that. The entire room stares at you as if you were the defendant. If you act impulsively, you will reinforce the false narrative they created. So, even with my heart bursting in my chest, even with the anger burning beneath the skin, even with sadness weighing down like an invisible weight, you make a decision that requires enormous emotional strength. You won't react at that moment. Don't scream. Don't confront anyone in the midst of the chaos. Don't give anyone the pleasure of seeing you lose control. You decide to wait. Wait until the last slide. Wait until that entire manipulated narrative is revealed. Wait until people's emotional economy reaches its limit. Wait until the attack is over. And then, yes, speak with authority. This is a difficult choice, very difficult, because everything inside you is telling you to act. Instinct screams, stop it now. Dignity says, defend yourself. The heart pleads, don't endure this injustice in silence. But his mind, the cold part, the part that can still think logically, says something else. If I interrupt, they'll say I'm trying to hide something. If I lose my temper, they'll interpret it as guilt. If I react in the heat of the moment, I'll look exactly like what they're trying to portray. And then you breathe. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a second. Gather every bit of strength you have. And it takes the most powerful stance possible in a moment of injustice. Strategic silence. It is not a silence born of fear. It is a silence of observation. To be firm. Of resistance. It's about choosing the right moment to get up. You keep your chin up, even though everything inside is falling apart. You focus on the screen, even when you want to. Look away. You hear the whispers, the doubts, the hints, even if every word is a blow. And as the succession of visual accusations continues, you realize something crucial. The author of that, whoever it was relying on his emotional breakdown, trusting that you would lose control, trusting that you would explode in front of the whole family, reinforcing the false image they had created. But you're not going to give anyone that satisfaction. Not there. Not yet. His confusion remains immense. His sadness continues to hurt. His anger continues to simmer. But now, all of this is starting to organize itself within you like fuel, as preparation, like an inner force that grows and becomes stronger. The silent revolt is born in that instant. It is silent, but powerful. It is silent, but firm. It's silent, but strategic. And in the midst of this emotional storm, a promise forms within you, without words, only with the raw force of instinct. I'm going to find out who did this. I'm going to show the truth, but I'll do that at the right time. And that time is approaching. The slideshow advances to the last slides. Tensions are rising. Your patience is tested to the limit, but you resist. Because now you know you need to see everything. Absolutely everything. To understand the extent of the attack. And when the screen finally goes dark, only then will you speak. And when you speak, no one will be able to ignore you. When the last slide finally disappears from the screen, the room is plunged into a silence so profound it seems to swallow the air. The projector's faint hiss is the only sound present, but even that seems distant, almost irrelevant in the face of the emotional weight that has taken hold of everyone. There are no more laughs, no more whispers. There isn't even any movement of chairs, only silence, the kind of silence born of guilt, doubt, and shame. You remain seated for a few seconds, as if letting your mind catch up with your body. It's a necessary pause. You feel your heart slowing, your hands returning to normal, your breathing finding a less frantic rhythm. Now that the avalanche is over, you know the moment has arrived. The time to speak. The time has come to demand answers. The time has come to confront the truth. Then you stand up, slowly, firmly. The sound of the chair scraping on the floor echoes in the room, but no one dares to react. All eyes turn to you, no longer with contempt, but with something new. Tension, curiosity, guilt, fear. You walk a few steps forward, positioning yourself where everyone can see you clearly. Your posture is calm, yet firm, Your face shows no despair, no explosive anger. It shows control. And that control makes all the difference. You look at the familiar audience and ask in a steady, impeccably clear voice, "Who prepared this?" The question falls into the room like a silent bomb. Some swallow hard. Others look away. One or the other brings their hand to their face, embarrassed. No one responds immediately. It's as if everyone expects that other he should have spoken first. It was as if everyone knew something was wrong, but lacked the courage to confront the perpetrator of the cruelty directly. Then you repeat, more firmly, "I want to know who did this." There is movement in the second row. Someone, you know exactly who, starts fidgeting in their chair, restless. Exchange nervous glances with someone nearby. She sighs. She tries to maintain her composure, but her body betrays everything. Her legs wobble, her fingers tremble, her face turns red. The whole room notices. The tension is growing like a wave. Finally, this person tries to speak. "Look, I didn't do it alone. I was asked to," but the sentence is incomplete. Words get tangled in the mouth, laden with guilt and fear, and right there, in that instant, the lie begins to crumble on its own. You take a step forward. There's no need to shout. There's no need to threaten. You just need to look closely. "Who asked for this?" The person hesitates. Their eyes fill with panic. Take a deep breath. He looks around, as if searching for an ally. But no one extends a hand. No one looks away out of solidarity. No one tries to protect her. It's the price you pay for setting a trap and falling into it right in front of everyone. Finally, with a trembling voice, the person says, "Okay, it was me. I set everything up, but I only did it because... Break. The face. Contorts. A mascara. I was tired of always seeing you being praised, always being the good guy, always being the responsible one. I wanted people to see the other side. The word that carries the most weight there isn't envy. It's meanness. It's pent-up resentment. It's anger that has accumulated over years over small things, comparisons, old stories, and unresolved wounds. But the person continues. And also, they told me things. They told me that you had done certain things. That you weren't who you seemed to be. The whole family is restless and fidgety. They told me things. This changes everything. You realize it immediately. Someone planted the seed. Someone whispered poison. Someone manipulated this person. Perhaps out of self-interest. Perhaps out of pure malice. Who said that? You ask. The person hesitates, but this time there's nowhere to run. Name someone. A name you weren't expecting, but which at the same time makes sense. A name that hurts you, because it belongs to someone you never imagined capable of being a part of this. A jolt ripples through the room. Some family members murmur. Others put their hand over their mouth. An aunt lets out an almost inaudible, "Oh my God." Expressions change. Some realize they have been manipulated. Others are beginning to understand the cold treatment they've shown you since your arrival. Others are deeply ashamed for having believed so quickly, for having judged without asking anything, because now it's clear. None of that came from facts. None of that actually happened. None of this had solid roots. It was envy. It was resentment. It was wounded people trying to wound others. It was a succession of half-truths, confusion, gossip, and distorted interpretations that turned into a storm, and you were the perfect target. Suddenly, several eyes turned to you, but this time, not with a trial. Now, with regret, ashamed, guilty, afraid of having participated, even unintentionally, in that public destruction. The person who confessed is on the verge of tears, not because of the pain it caused you, but because of the weight of being exposed in front of everyone, because the mask fell off at the worst possible moment. And you realize something very important. The truth didn't need shouting. There was no need for violence. There was no need for chaos. She just needed space. And you gave space when you decided to wait until the end, when you decided not to react impulsively, when you stood firm. Now, everyone sees the naked light of reality, and this light is cruel to those who tried to destroy you. The family is shocked, not only because of what they saw in the slideshow, but because they allowed themselves to be manipulated so easily, because they believed rumors, because they treated you like a stranger, for having chosen silence, distance, and judgment, instead of choosing you. And amidst the heavy silence that follows the confession, one thing becomes clear. You didn't lose. Your family that day. Your family has lost you. The confession still lingered in the air when you realized that this was the moment. For a moment, the room was in shock, paralyzed between shame and disbelief. People blinked slowly, unsure where to put their hands, unsure where to look. The silence was now different, not the heavy silence of before, but the silence that precedes the truth. And that's when you did something simple, but devastating. You took your cell phone out of your pocket. Slowly. Take it easy. No rush. Several people watched the movement unfold. Some swallowed hard, others held their breath. The person who had confessed remained rigid in their chair, as if they knew, instinctively, that the worst was yet to come. You picked up the phone and said, in a firm, clear, and unwavering voice, "Now you'll see what really happened." No words could have had a greater impact. No accusation, no shout, no emotional outburst would be as powerful as the calmness with which you said that. You unlocked your phone, opened conversations, folders, screenshots, documents, everything organized, everything dated, everything documented. Because unlike those who fabricated the accusations, you've always had the habit of documenting the important things in life. Not because you distrust people, but because you're a responsible, careful, and attentive person. And now, this quality, so often ignored, would be your greatest weapon. The first piece of evidence, the original. Messages. You project onto the screen or show on your cell phone, passing it around among family members. The original conversation that has been manipulated. The real version. Uncut, unedited, no invented words. The difference between what actually existed and what was shown in the slideshow is so striking that people immediately begin to murmur, "This is completely different. Look at the date, it doesn't match the slide. They cut out phrases. My God, this is a hoax." And you continue, calm, firm, almost surgical. Show it line by line. Show them where they manipulated the image to incriminate you. It shows how they exchanged words. How did they make cuts out of context? How did they take random excerpts and turn them into entire accusations? Each piece of evidence is a stab in the face of lies, and each stab wound makes the truth emerge stronger within the room. The second exam. Dates and times. You open the history. It shows that you were working on the day suggested by one of the slides and presents the electronic record. It shows that, at another supposedly compromising time, you were at a medical appointment and presents the medical certificate. Shows location, receipts, full screenshots. It is undeniable, irrefutable, unbreakable. The narrative built against you begins to crumble like a house of cards, and as you continue presenting the evidence, something starts to happen to the people in the room. Faces change, expressions change. Backs that were once straight and full of confidence are beginning to sag. Some adults look at the ground, ashamed. Some stare into the void, shocked by their own credulity. Others put their hands to their faces, trying to hide their shame. An aunt even murmurs, "Oh my God, I treated you so badly today." And you continue, because it's not over yet. The third piece of evidence, the editing of the forbidden photo. You open an application, show original photo, show the edited file, show what has been added. It shows how the lighting was altered, how elements were inserted, how phrases were placed. The entire room lets out a collective sound of shock. This time, louder, clearer. No, it can't be. Did they do that to the photo? But that's a crime! The weight of truth begins to crush the lie that once seemed so convincing. The fourth piece of evidence, the intention behind it all. And then you deliver the final blow. Show leaked conversations, screenshots you received from someone who suspected the story and alerted you. Hidden messages where that person, the one responsible for the slideshow, was seeking help to ruin their image. Texts with phrases such as, "He always thinks he's better. We're going to show him who he really is. With this, no one else will side with him." The family's eyes widen. Everyone's emotional ground is shaking. Now there is no longer any doubt. There is no loophole. There is no room for excuses. You were not the victim of a misunderstanding. He was not the victim of a simple rumor. He was not the victim of exaggeration. You were the victim of a deliberate campaign of destruction, a planned plot, meticulous, cruel. The narrative turn. And that's when everything changes. The narrative that, just minutes before, painted you as the villain, now it shows you as a victim. The narrative that accused you, now he accuses the real perpetrator of the attack. The narrative that isolated you, now isolate those who tried to destroy you. People are starting to connect the dots. They are beginning to realize how they were manipulated. How could they believe without questioning? How unfairly you were judged. How could they allow a well-told lie to be stronger than years of living together? Shock turns into guilt. Guilt turns into regret. Regret turns into emotion. And for the first time since you arrived, someone stands up. He's a cousin. He looks into her eyes and says, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have believed you." An aunt approaches, visibly emotional. "Forgive me. I was unfair to you." An older nephew, "I should have spoken to you first. We wronged you." The apology begins timidly, but within minutes it becomes a current. Several family members stood up, one after the other, acknowledging the mistake, acknowledging that you were hurt, acknowledging that they failed, and you just stand there, listening to everything, not out of ego, not out of pride, but because every request for forgiveness is proof that the truth has prevailed, that the attack failed. What did you resist? And that despite everything, you maintained your dignity. When the truth finally settles in, it doesn't arrive as a scream. It arrives as a weight that falls upon everyone present, revealing everything that was hidden in the shadows, the manipulations, the lies, the distortions, the cowardice. The room, once filled with silent judgments, is now filled with regret. But this regret doesn't erase what happened, and you know it. You stand in the center of that emotional circle, feeling all eyes on you. But now they aren't accusatory gazes. They are broken, guilty gazes, pleading for forgiveness without even speaking. And in that moment, you understand something profound. When someone opens emotional wounds of this magnitude, there is no going back to what it was before. Because some truths, once revealed, can no longer be invisible. Some pains cannot simply be ignored, but you also realize something else. You don't need to carry hatred. The hatred is heavy. It poisons. It corrodes. It binds you to the abuser and prevents you from moving on. So you make a choice that many people are unable to make in the face of such great humiliation. You decide not to hold a grudge, but it imposes limits, clear boundaries, firms, unbreakable. You take a deep breath, look at your family, and say something that comes from the depths of your soul, pure and true. Family is not about blood. It's about character. The ka-I sentence darts across the room like an arrow. Some close their eyes. Others are holding back tears. Others swallow hard. Because it's true. It's painfully true. You explain in a calm voice that you love those people, that you grew up with them, that you shared good and bad memories, that you were there for them during difficult times. But you make it clear that love is not a justification for accepting emotional abuse, that affection is not a reason to tolerate injustice, that biological ties cannot serve as an excuse for cowardice, envy, betrayal, or cruelty. You say you don't hold on to hatred because hatred only binds you to the past, but he also makes it clear that he's not going to pretend nothing happened. You can't ignore the fact that they betrayed you, that they believed lies, that they judged you without asking anything, that they treated you like an intruder in their own family. You claim that forgiving is not forgetting. It's about setting free, but forgiveness is not synonymous with unrestricted coexistence. It is not synonymous with automatic trust. It is not synonymous with allowing new wounds to emerge. You forgive, but don't forget. And most importantly, don't repeat the mistake of trusting blindly. Gradually, you see family members understanding the difference. They realize it's not pride, it's self-protection. It's not revenge, it's maturity, which is not coldness, it's self-respect. You set limits, boundaries of coexistence, boundaries of intimacy, boundaries of emotional access. And he explains that, from now on, any relationship needs to be built on truth, not appearances. On character, not convenience. On respect, not gossip. On real love, not manipulation. When you say that, you feel something change inside you. It's not just relief, it's rebirth. You realize that that pain can be transformed into something greater, in something that strengthens you, in something that teaches you, in something that defines new paths. And then you share with everyone, and with those watching the story, the reflection that accompanied you throughout this entire process. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those from whom we most expect protection. The phrase is harsh, but liberating. It's like a reminder that danger isn't always outside the house. Sometimes it's inside, and that love, when blind, can become a prison. But when it matures, it becomes a compass. The family members agree, not because they want to please you, But now they see the extent of the damage they allowed. Every excuse they receive is true, painful, and necessary. But you understand that it's not your role to rebuild their consciousness. That's their own responsibility. What you need to rebuild now is something else. Yourself, your peace, your balance, his perspective on relationships, your faith in the right people. And you do this by taking the hardest step, to close that chapter without hatred, but also without naivete. You make it clear that you will continue living your life, that you will carry on with dignity, that you will not let that experience erase who you are. Because you are not what they said in the slides. You are not the lies they created. You are who you have built yourself into throughout your life, and the evidence has shown that. And before concluding your speech, you look at everyone calmly and say, I hope this serves as a lesson for all of us. Words can hurt, but lies can destroy an entire family. From that moment on, the atmosphere changes completely. People stand up to hug you. Some apologize again. Others just watch you with a mixture of admiration and embarrassment. But you'll take it all in stride, because now you're in control. Now you are aware. Now you have limits. Now you have strength. And most importantly, now you have the truth. If this story caught your attention, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me bring you more intense stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your family used a slideshow to expose you in front of everyone?